All right, well, let's get started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Trinity. I am the marketing and social media coordinator here at Instituto. And just in case you don't know us or this is your first Instituto event, a little bit about us. We build sustained political power with communities of color and low-income communities in Arizona. And we do this by providing incubation and acceleration and capacity building for individuals and organizations. And in case you're like, what is incubation and what is acceleration? We do this in a couple different ways. We do it through our coaching. We offer one-on-one coaching services, as well as different fellowships like Monzon Fellowship, which you may have heard of. We do this through trainings like this one, and then also resources that live on our website, like our Praxis in Action library, where you could find free resources on facilitation, on art and social movement. We have a lot of trainings on there. And we did this because in 2027, we know that power is going to be shifting. Arizona will become a majority person of color state. And that doesn't necessarily mean representation equals political power. So we're working to make sure that that balance is shifting. So we're governing, we're voting, and we're sharing, and we're incubating and accelerating. Cool. And this is some folks on the team. We have our executive director, Shelly Jackson, our operations director, Liz Salazar, the administrative and executive associate, Alga Mengesha. And then we have Mo, our development coordinator. And then we have our programs design manager, Emily. We have our data team. Victoria leads that. Vianey, who's here with us today. Brandon, our political manager. Gracia, another operations folk. We have Thania, who's here today as well. Comms team represent. Desiree Perez from data and research team. Myself, Paulette Zinzun, who's the political and talent coordinator. And then we have Kyle, our data and research specialist. And I'll pass.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, Trinity. And before we get started, wanted to make sure that we took some time to go over our community agreements. This is a full virtual space, so please make sure that if you're not speaking, please mute yourself just to avoid any background noise. Please use the tools that are available for us to engage, like raising your hand. At any point, if you have any questions, feel free to use all the reactions, and also utilize the chat to communicate any comments. And if you're like, yeah, I totally agree with that or disagree with that, or again, if you have any questions. If throughout this presentation, we're using too many lingo terms, please drop a giraffe emoji in the chat, or use a giraffe emoji as a reaction so that we know to define whatever that term is, right? Using that dragon giraffe. If there is something that you're like, oh, could you please explain what you mean by that term or that acronym? Please let us know. This is a C3 space, meaning if you are doing any sort of candidate or campaign work, please keep that information and plans to yourself. Please do not share that. This is a C3 space. But I also wanted to make sure that we opened it up to our participants. If there are any other community agreements that we would like to add, I can go ahead and add those now. All right. Anything in the chat? Okay, well, hearing nothing, I'll move us along, but if something does come up, please let us know. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so we do have 5 learning objectives for today's training. Want to make sure that we identify the different types of ads all across different platforms. Want to make sure that after this training, folks understand the purpose of each of these different types of ads. We'll have an opportunity to identify your own target audience. We want to make sure that you're also understand the concept of cost per lead and why it's important if you're running a digital paid ad campaign. And resources, we always will make sure to offer resources. Throughout this entire presentation, you'll be able to identify local advertising opportunities. We will do that by going through the following. We'll start off with the types of ads, get into that target audience, go over what messaging and digital, what messaging and design looks like on ads, touch on digital ads themselves, talk about budget and that cost per lead. And then towards the end, you'll also have an opportunity for you to pitch your ad right here with us, and we can provide some peer feedback. And again, while resources will be available throughout this presentation, we have a couple more offerings at the end of the presentation. All right, so when you think of ads, what comes to mind? Feel free to come off mute or drop it in the chat. But when you think of ads, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Meta ads. Okay, commercials. Okay, more meta. Ooh, data. Okay, thank you for sharing that, Raquel. All right. So when we talk about ads, we have traditional ads like print and media, right? Like those radio or television commercials. But we also have digital, and I heard a lot of Meta. We also have Google ads, right? Now all over the internet, no matter what site we're on, they're everywhere. When we talk about print, if you're going to be running a voter registration, a GOTV ad, right, we can go to newspapers, we can go to magazines, and even print billboards. If you notice, we have a couple of examples here on whether it's a newspaper or a magazine, you do have the option to get a full spread. You can get a full page, or you can get something a little smaller, right, depending on your budget. Most places will offer a variety of sizes. The bigger, the pricier, but they are always willing to work with your budget. So take a little look at that graph and keep some of those in mind. We're going to do a little activity with some examples here. So this first one on the voter registration drive, what kind of ad would that be? And again, feel free to come up mute or drop it in the chat. What are we thinking? Full page. That's correct. Now this second one, very funny. Beat puts this ad, I'm saying around 2008 or so, right? Probably before 2008. It's in the newspaper. We got a bit of a sliver down there. What kind of ad would that one be? It looks like this one would be a horizontal strip. Now going to the next one and our last one here. If this is a magazine and you're opening it up and you're reading it, what kind of ad would that be? This is what's called a spread or a full spread, right? You've got your ad on both pages, on both sides there. And so this is just touching a little bit on these options on when you're thinking about your ad, right? We are actually somewhat limited depending on our format. There's only so much amount of content that we can include in our ads. In Arizona, we actually still have a good amount of contacts and print outlets that you have the ability to run ads on. We've got 11 of these here for you. You will have access to this deck. The ones in pink are links to the direct website, but we have provided for you basically a contact list that you can check out depending on who you're trying to reach, right? Print ads, outlets for print ads, including Yuma, not just in Maricopa County, but outside Tucson, and here locally in the Valley as well. All right, let's get into billboards. So when we think about running ads on billboards, one of the biggest things that we want to think about is location, right? Where are these billboards located? And not just like in the zip code or in the area or the city, but also like, are they near a grocery store? Are they near a highway? What other community spaces are nearby? Maybe a park. When you're thinking about your billboard ad, you also want to think about that design and messaging. Those can go into B1, if you will, when it comes to designing it, right? We've got this very basic one, very bold, black and white. It tells you what it is, and you've got to click vote.org URL. Then you have another one with everybody's favorite Arizona senator. And you know, a certain group wants to thank her, and that's more for awareness as well, right? They want to demonstrate that they support this individual. And when you're looking at when you're thinking about doing billboard ads, you also want to keep that in mind, right? How much information are you going to provide? What is the purpose, the function of it? Do you want to drive people to a website? Do you just want to create awareness? Do you want to provide information? Thinking about those things can help you design your actual billboard ad. And now we also have digital billboards, right? You want to think about print versus digital. It's worth considering, right? Also, whoever is designing it, whether it's yourself or someone else, they got to know if it's going to be print or digital, to know whether they'll be designing in inches or pixels, a consideration for other visual elements. Color is important, right? Color on print and color on screens can look different. And you also want to consider timeline. Election years are, for advertising, that's how they're making their money, right? During election years. Billboards are no different. They become incredibly popular during election years. And the closer the election gets, the more expensive those billboard spaces can get. So consider your timeline. You probably want to get yours in pretty early, not only to book your space, right? Because depending if they're print or digital, there's only so many billboards and there's only so much amount of space left. You want to book yours early. The earlier you do it too, probably the cost will be lower, right? Maybe you can get like an early bird special. But you want to make sure that you're thinking about all of these things when you're running your ads. Moving along. In Arizona, we have a couple. The ones that are nationwide are not based here in Arizona. They're all over the country. Lamar specifically, not just in Arizona. They're in a few other states, but they're primarily in Arizona. You want to have this into consideration just because these are companies at the end of the day. And when it comes to political content, some folks may not be down with it as much. Just for example, in a previous role, right after the insurrection, we wanted to create awareness about certain legislators, the Arizona Capitol, that were also insurrectionists. And some of these companies were like, yeah, we're not gonna do that. You can't advertise that with us. So thinking in mind, shopping around, making sure that you do some sort of research and looking into who will be down to advertise what you're trying to advertise. These are also linked. The underlined ones are linked, and you'll have access directly to their website pages. All right, moving on to media. As someone mentioned earlier, right, we got a lot of commercials during election years. Like that's all that's on TV, right? Mostly candidate campaigns, whether it's pro or against candidates. But we also have some GOTV and voter registration ads I've seen more of. And also radio. Radio is still actually pretty alive, depending on your audience. And then just something to note is that these are FCC regulated, meaning that it can get a little complicated depending on the amount of advertising you want to do. But just keeping in mind that when you're advertising on traditional media, there's a limit to how much you can do. So I would recommend looking a little bit more into those regulations, depending on your campaign. Civic engagement like GOTV and voter registration tend to be a little less regulated, but if you're doing more hard stuff, C4 stuff, talk to your lawyer about how much you can do. And then, yeah, just keeping the cost in mind for TV, they will, right, because these are on bigger national channels, will be more expensive. But radio is actually pretty affordable. And so in Arizona, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 main channels. 2 that are very popular in Spanish language, and the rest in English language. Something else that you also might want to consider, right, is who owns those channels. Very similar, right? If you're running a campaign and you're going a little harder on an elected or candidate, think about who owns that channel and whether or not it may be rejected. Fortunately, our local Fox channel is not the same as what we know cable Fox to be. But so whether that is an earned media spot, right, we have these opportunities to plug into. And then similarly for radio, something that is a little interesting here is that many of the English-speaking radio is now owned or in some way, shape, or form related to our iHeartMedia or iHeartRadio. So whether it's 98.3 or 99.9 or 101.5, all of our local stations are all under the iHeartRadio umbrella now. So if you want to advertise on those stations, you would have to contact iHeartMedia. And then, except for KJZZ, independent radio, still going strong. Fortunately, KJZZ is independently operated. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 other independent Spanish-speaking owned radio stations. If you Radio Vianey, I believe it's how it's pronounced, is down at the border. So Southern Arizona, if you're trying to reach folks down there. Radio Manantial is a Christian station, Spanish-speaking Christian station. They're based in Nogales, but they air throughout the state. So if you're trying to reach conservative Spanish speakers, think about contacting them. We have La Onda en la Campesina, which are a little similar, but La Onda actually has a magazine that goes along with their radio. So you have this opportunity to double down on advertising there. All right, so as we've talked about these different formats, this takes us into our audience because while these different formats offer us a variety of spaces, it really depends on our audience. We gotta meet our people where they're at. Who are you trying to reach? That also is an important consideration when thinking about building your ad campaign. Think about location and other demographics, like down to the zip code, right? If you're running, again, kind of going back to the billboards, who are you trying to reach? And will they have the opportunity to see your billboard? Think about the best way that that audience engages. Are they older folks? Will they be listening to the radio or be spending more time on Facebook? Or do they pick up a magazine? Versus if they're younger and you know that TikTok and Instagram is a place to be. Even language is very important to consider, right? We have different options and different outlets. So you want to make sure that they're also available in a language that, whether it's a first language or a second language, right? For Spanish speakers, we have Spanglish even, a mix of English and Spanish that is actually very relevant to today's generation. And we've also learned that rural communities can't be reached the same as our urban communities, right? We know that depending on where they're located, we can't just depend on digital ads when our communities don't have bandwidth and they won't be reached by those digital ads. So we're going to do a little activity. We're going to practice identifying your own target audience. So take a few minutes to think about it, but once you have it, who are you trying to reach? And how would you go about reaching them? You can come off mute to share or drop it in the chat.
We actually just did the data on this because I've been trying to format and have like a record of everything communications for our org that we didn't have before. So we started with audience and the people who follow us. We went through all of our platforms and got the data on like people who not only follow us, but also engage with our posts often and share our content. And for the most part, it's queer millennials. So people my age. I'm the target audience.
Very interesting. And so, Raquel, how would you go about reaching them?
So one thing we've noticed is that our highest engagement is when we share some type of like either a video or an event that we're doing. It's like one or the other, an event or a video. And so that means people really like stimulation and something to act on. I personally like that too. When I follow pages, I usually go to their pages to see what they have going on and like ways that I can connect if we're talking about like other activist organizations. Otherwise, I just like engagement. I like things to share to my own story. So we've been kind of pivoting and been refocusing on making TikToks that are relevant to our demographic.
That's beautiful. Wow. Yes, data is very important, right? It can feed us a lot of information and help us make decisions. You mentioned events, right? Like maybe setting up ads online. It seems like you have a very active online community, but also maybe potentially flyers or a billboard saying like this event, you're hosting this big event and you want as many people to show up. Who else would like to share? I saw something drop in the chat.
Something that we're struggling with here is we're trying to reach a younger audience in rural Arizona specifically. And we're finding that it's actually a lot of older people, older women, like I think over the age of it's like 65 plus. and we're really trying to get like the younger people. So yeah, we're really struggling there.
Interesting, interesting. Okay, so you're trying to reach younger folks,
In
but
rural Arizona, yeah. And
in
it's
rural Arizona.
yeah, it's having like yeah, we're just reaching yeah, we're reaching older people, specifically those who identify as female.
But they are not your target
Uh
audience.
yeah, we're trying to reach more of more of like Gen Z. And we've been doing TikToks. We've been doing more like trends and stuff. But yeah, as for ads, that one's really hard because we do go through Meta a lot. And
Mhm.
we do have Instagram ads as well, but for some reason they're just not as effective as the ones we put on Facebook. Um, but yeah, it's mostly it's the demographic that interacts with our stuff the most is not like our target, I guess.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Sometimes it does just take trying a couple different things, right? At Instituto, we love to experiment. And something that is available, fortunately, on digital ads is setting up a what is it called? You can compare two campaigns. That goes a little bit more in depth, but that is an option that you have at Araceli. In terms of you identified your target audience, what else are you thinking in terms of reaching them?
So for reaching them, we've tried keeping it on topic of ads. We've just been doing just digital ads, really. We've tried doing videos like TikTok videos, just doing like easy graphics that just, have a couple words and we want them to take action. Like right now we're trying to get the youth in Pinal County to take a survey for us. And yeah, we just haven't been getting a lot of engagement on that.
I've got a lot of ideas and maybe we can touch base after this training. So let's stay in touch.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for indulging me. Let's move on to messaging. When it comes to advertisements, we've got very limited amount of either actual space or just time, right? And we've learned that the shorter the ad, whether it's a radio or a video, the better they perform. When it comes to print media, the simpler they are, the better they perform. Going back to our billboard ads, right? We now have print and we now have digital billboards. Something else to consider there, right, is that when you're advertising on digital, they circulate out. You've got like 5 different ads that are circulating throughout the day versus a print ad that will stay there in that location for however long amount that you've decided for, right? So think about the content that goes into those. If you have ones that are circling in and out, you probably want to have people, your main message, and have them know whatever that call to action is. Versus a print one, right, that will be on there forever, or not forever, but a longer amount of time. They may have more time to read, they have more time to find the URL, maybe even a QR code, right? Versus billboards that are by the highway and people are driving. You probably don't want to put a QR code on something that is circulating in and out and that people won't have a chance to pull out their phone and scan. So thinking about that content, including your messaging, right? What is that main idea that you are trying to put out there? And what is it that you want that reader or your audience to take away? And you always want to make sure you have a call to action. If it's GOTV, the main message there is go vote or make a plan to vote, right? you want to make sure that there is something, I think Raquel mentioned it earlier, about having actionable items in that content. Very similar for these ads. You want to make sure that they are being sent somewhere, whether it's a link or a website, making it as simple as possible for your user, your reader, to be able to take that action. So let's get some more practice in here. I've color coded because I will provide an example on that main idea that we want to push out. A key message that can be like a soundbite, right? Think about it if it was like media, like on TV or radio, and what's your call to action? And for the following, in 2020 and 2019, leading up to 2020 census, we've had all sorts of ads going out, everything from print, traditional, digital, radio, you name it. And so something that we wanted to make sure that was the basic idea is that the 2020 census is happening. People didn't really know, right? It was 2020, we were competing with the presidential election. So we wanted to make sure that people know, hey, this is happening. The 2020 census is happening. Something that we found because of data that we had in research was that in past censuses, folks tend to forget or exclude grandparents and children in the household. And unfortunately, children in Arizona have gone undercounted for decades. So something that we wanted to make sure people got was that, yes, the census is happening. Please count your grandparents and your children. Please don't forget about them. And then the call to action was very simple. Fortunately, the call to action was, yes, complete the census. But for the first time ever, the census would be available to complete online. So we wanted to make sure that we drove people to the website where it was being held. So the census is happening. Please count the children. And this is where you can go to do that. So back to our audience. Who would like to give an example or try building a quick little message right now? And if maybe you don't know how to start, we can help you start it. You can think about too, like a different format. My example was specifically for radio, right? We wanted to get it quick, to the punch, under, I think it was like 15 seconds. Araceli, something that came to mind earlier as you were talking about your target audience versus who you're actually reaching was if you're getting older folks, right? Maybe the ask for them is share this with your grandson or your grandchild. Send this to your favorite grandchild. Or invite your family, something that, you know, they can still be a vehicle. They're definitely, it seems like they're interested, right? And they're interested enough to stay engaged that they can be used as a vehicle and a messenger even.
Yeah, no, thank you for that idea. I think we are gonna have to start putting that, share with your grandkid, because, we're just not getting like the age group that, that we want. I guess for an example for this, so we're hosting a listening session in Cochise County in about like 2 weeks, or is it 2 weeks, or I think it's either at the end of this week or at the end of next week. I cannot remember anymore. But yeah, we're just trying to get it's a listening session at our office in Cochise County. It's we're trying to get once again, we're trying to get young voters to go to this listening session and, you know, express what they how they want to get involved in this election season, what they want to see, and, you know, what hopes they have for it. So yeah, like I guess like the key message that we'd want them to take away is I guess is, you know, just, you know, get involved and engaged in your local elections, maybe.
Well, thank you for sharing. Here is what I captured. So you have an event, basically, right? You
Yes.
want young voters to attend the event.
Yes.
And so let's say it's on Friday. So it could be something like or is it Raise? Raise is your C3, right?
Yes, raise.
Raise is hosting a listening session, or Raise wants to hear from you. Then for the pink, it would be young voters can decide our next election, or young voters, something that we know is true, in fact, right? Young voters turn out in record numbers. We want to hear from you. Like tying in there that you gotta hear we need to hear their voice. Come share your priorities or what's important to you as a young voter. And then your call to action, right? Is it like a sign up page or RSVP, right? RSVPs make it sound like,
Yeah.
it can be like, yeah, and a special event and you RSVP for it. Like that, creating this exclusivity around it. That's kind of how I would, yeah. Your main idea is that this event is happening and you need the youth to show up. Your key message for them is that their voice is important. Your call to action would be sign up or RSVP, something around those lines.
Thank you.
Any other questions or folks who would like to share? Can brainstorm a little bit. No worries. We'll keep it moving. All right. Well, for this portion, I'm going to pass it on to Thania, who will go over digital.
Hey y'all. So digital ads are probably my favorite ads. They're the most fun to play around with, and there's so many types of ads. So let's get into it. Next slide. So what are digital ads? Digital advertisements refers to the marketing through online platforms such as websites, streaming content, social media platforms, and much more. We interact with digital ads almost every single day. If you have a phone, a computer, even YouTube, everything, you will see a digital ad at some point in this day. I wonder if we like counted how many ads we'd see, we'd probably see more than 25 at this point. But yeah, next slide. So before we jump into the types of digital ads, I just want to know the difference between a digital ad campaign and boosted content. So a digital ad campaign, it's a strategic approach to promote civic engagement or issue across multiple digital platforms, such as digital publications like Meta, aka Facebook, Instagram, Google. And the goal is to bring awareness or call to action. In our case, as we're doing more Get Out the Vote, is to register people to vote, get people to the polls. And so one of the examples that has stuck in my head for a long time. I don't know if y'all remember. It started way back in the 90s. It's called Rock the Vote campaign. And Rock the Vote's campaign is to turn out young people to register to vote and turn out for every single election. And they do this by spreading their call to action and education throughout platforms in various formats. So as you can see in the example, we have a Rock the Vote, and they use celebrities too. So celebrities is kind of like their main drawer, and music as well. So they have an Instagram account where they're talking about why it's so important to vote. We have will.i.am on a YouTube video saying why you should vote. So all of these are spread out among different platforms, different formats. And so that's what a digital ad campaign is. And so then boosted content, these are the organic posts on social media that are promoted to a wider audience through paid advertising. So you can go into any of your original content right now and put boosted ads on it. So for example, any boosted Instagram stories, posts, they'll likely have, like, as you can see with the cute picture of the dog, you'll see like a learn more. So it brings awareness. It could go to sign up, learn more. So these are the boosted digital content that are really easy to just go ahead and put some money. It can be like $5 a day, $10. So these are things that we already have in our organic content feed. Next slide. All right. So there are many types of ads, many. I saw some lists that said like 29 different types of digital ads, but we want to really hone in on the 4 digital ads types that make sense for getting out the vote. So we're going to cover display ads, search ads, social media ads, and video ads. Next. All right. So display ads are either, their format can be in static images, graphics, video, animation, and you can see display ads almost in any type of website. You can go onto AZ Central, Phoenix New Times is the example here. There are so many websites, even blogs too, that have display ads. And depending on the size, the shape, where it's at on a website, they can differ in different prices. And with these, you really want to, when you're creating these graphics, you really want to name your ads so then SEO can pick it up. For example, right here with the Bosa Donuts, a great way to have that SEO pick up is to put Bosa Donuts, Arizona. Where can I find donuts, or something like that? So be very specific as you're naming these graphics, so then SEO can pick them up. And then next slide. Okay, search ads. So these ones are ones that, as you can see, are very text-based. They're a headline, a description, and site links. So basically that messaging that Vianey was talking about is kind of how you can cater the text search ads too. So you have your donate to Bernie 2020, make a contribution, and then it says the example, and then the link is the call to action. And all of these can be found like on Google website browser searches. I remember in 2022, I was literally just looking up how to vote, and there was ad campaigns of like, here, come to vote with this organization, or here's a voter guide. Like I would look up, where do I vote in Arizona? And then someone's voter guide would come up. So all of these, you want to think about what key terms people are using to search voting information. So it can be how to vote in Arizona, where do I vote in Arizona, where's my nearest polling location. So put yourself in the user of like the user end of saying like, what would I be searching for in this vote, and while I'm looking up for voter information. And so these platforms include Google searches. And in that link there, you can look up more information on how you can set up a Google search ad. Next slide.
Tanya, do you want to talk about the other resource, Google Display Network?
Oh yes, Google Display Network is also another, it's a spot where you can put in your ad and they will strategically place it in places that make sense for your audience. And so that's a really cool, I haven't used it yet, so I'm really interested. I was just learning about it yesterday. And so that's a really cool resource, and that's also linked in there and how to set that. Right. Okay, social media. These are the ones that I've worked on the most. I believe these are like the easiest and fastest ways to get digital ads out, especially if you're already set up with an ad account. And so these platforms, and the format is static images or video. The platforms include Meta, aka Facebook, Instagram. I feel like I always have to say that because, you know, that's what it is now. And then something to note is that you can't put get out the vote or political ads on X, formerly known as Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok. They have some restrictions on that. But there is a loop around with using influencer marketing. So for TikTok, you can have an influencer talk about get out the vote instead of having like an actual digital ad that you paid for. So that's a loop around with that. And let me see in the chat, get into the influencer marketing. Back in the day, I used to be a little influencer. Back in 2020, I was trying to pay some bills. But yeah, Deja. Okay, next slide. Format. Okay, video. So these can be longer form. They can be a minute to even 30 minutes. And while there are longer forms for video, we do recommend that ads, under a minute ads do perform better. Just faster, get your message across. And these platforms include YouTube and Meta, Facebook, Instagram platforms. And so there's so many ways. Those four types of ads are just a few ways that you can get it out there for digital ads. And yeah, that's it for ads. I will pass it back to Vianey.
Thank you. So now that we've talked a little bit more about the different types of both digital and traditional ads, let's talk about budget and cost per lead and what even is a cost per lead. So as you're setting these up, whether again it's traditional or digital, you want to make sure that you set a budget and you stick to it. You also want to shop around, not just in terms of your format, but also, right, if you're doing print, we just covered how we have in Arizona statewide 11 different outlets. So shop around to the one that makes sense for you and your budget as well. Ask questions as well. If you're not familiar with who their audience is or how many people they reach, ask them. You hold the power. You are a stakeholder in this position. You have the business and they want your business. So don't be afraid to inquire more and even ask them to work with your budget. Oftentimes, print, billboard, and radio stations, in my experience, will work with the budget that you bring them. Because again, they want your business. If you say, for this month, I only have $2,000 to spend for radio spots. You let them know that and they will work with you. Oftentimes, if you don't have a script writer or someone to do the voiceover recording, they will provide that for you. But make sure that when it comes to setting up your budget, you do got to sit down and do the math in terms of reach. And this is when we get into the cost per lead. So your cost per lead is basically a way to measure how cost effective your ad campaign is, again, whether it's traditional or digital. And for us, right, in the advocacy space, that's usually people registering to vote or exposure and awareness to send them to the polls. Even if we want to get more specific, election protection, right? But this helps us measure the effectiveness of these ads. You don't want to spend thousands of dollars on an ad campaign and not know what the outcome was, right? You want to make sure that whether it's radio or digital, meta, magazine, you have some sort of idea of how many people you are reaching with that amount of money. For instance, if you are going to run an ad on Instagram and you are going to drive people to register to vote and you spend $5, right? Boosting that organic post. You spent $5 and through those $5 that you spent, you actually got 25 people to register to vote. That means that each individual cost about a couple cents to get them to register to vote. You want to keep your cost low and your outcome higher. You don't want to be spending more money than you're reaching people. If you are spending, let's break it down by day, right? If in a day you're spending $20 to get out an ad in a day, and let's keep it simple, right? It's just on Meta, it's just on Facebook. You spend $25 on it and you're only got about 2-3 people to sign up to register to vote. That means you're spending about $7-8 a person, a lead, to register to vote. That's too high. You want to keep it lower. You want to keep it ideally in like $1, $2, $3 per lead, right? You don't want to be spending $5 to get one person to register to vote. When it comes to billboards, it gets a little trickier, right? It's a little harder to know how many people you reached with a billboard if you don't have a very specific URL or ask. So GeoTV ads on billboards, a lot of people will see them, but if a billboard costs around $8,000 to $5,000, you don't know how many people are actually showing up to vote, maybe it's not worth it, right? Maybe consider another format. Similarly, if you're on radio, years ago, I forgot how many years ago, probably the 2 elections ago, I was on 99.9 and there's a very conservative ad on there. And I was like, oh my gosh, how could they run this ad? But if you think about it, right, the people who listen to 99.9, they play, what do they play on there? Older music, which means that they probably have older English speaking language, probably have older English speakers. So it would make sense for them to, and just the other content that they have on 99.9, right? They have like good feel stories, they have Christmas music during the holidays. That space, maybe, we're not going to be reaching people that we want in that space. So maybe don't spend $5,000 or $1,000 up in a radio station that your people aren't even going to hear what you need them to hear. So all of these factors come into play as you're building your budget and you're trying to crack down on that cost per lead. If you set down your base and you tell yourself, I only want to spend $3 max on the lead, then you're able to track as your ads are performing. And if it is the case that you're at some point you're spending $10 for one lead, you can say, okay, this isn't working. Let's pull these ads. Let's take this down. Let's try something else. Experimenting is very much a natural form of this as you're learning the ways, the ropes, and even your market. or your audience or your base, however you want to call it, right? As you're learning and identifying how things change. And again, kind of to Aracelis' point, right? How do you reach folks in a rural community where digital media isn't necessarily the key and you end up reaching something else? You can adapt, you can shift, you can change messaging, you can change format. So all of that in mind as you're building this. All right. So now it's your turn. You'll have about 5 minutes or so, let's say 5 minutes, to build, to pitch and get feedback on your own ad. So with everything that we've just learned, thinking back, what format would you pick? Would you go digital or print or traditional? Again, who are you trying to reach? Ask yourself that, and that'll help you make those other decisions. Think about location, right? Even if for the sake of this experiment, you can, or this activity, you can think of a zip code. And then how much would you be willing to spend? And even consider other languages. Would you have them in multiple languages? Try to get some background music going while folks think about what would your ad look like? I am having the hardest time picking music.
And we have a question in the chat. Is this specifically for GLTV or for any campaign?
As long as it's a C3, we can talk about it. Again, walls are up. We don't want to get into C4 discussions. So by that, I mean, if you're running a campaign for a candidate or an issue, we won't be able to speak about that here. But if it's more civic engagement, more C3 oriented, we can definitely talk about that. Folks able to hear the music? Is that better?
Like,
All right.
you can hear something, but it's not really picking up.
I might have my mic on to not pick up background noise. Sorry about that, folks.
I can share music, but I don't know if it'll take away your share abilities for your screen. I'll play music through here. Can y'all hear that? Yeah. You can't hear it? No. Never mind.
All right, 1 more minute. All right. Who would like to share?
I can go. So based on like what we learned, so for the format, I was thinking maybe like since digital hasn't really been working out for us, maybe we could do like radio or even like print. Like maybe we can hand out flyers at events that our team tables at. Those can come in English and Spanish. Just for the just for the scenario, I'm just gonna say we're trying to target young rural voters in Yuma County. So for example, like I know in Yuma County there is there's both English and Spanish speakers. So yeah, we'd probably try to do ads in both languages. As for how much are you spending, I think I'd have to do like research on that because I've never ran like radio ads before. So yeah, I think that's something that I'd have to probably discuss with whichever team I am working on this with, and whoever we go to like for a radio ad.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you for sharing. Anyone else? One more brave soul.
I'll share. So I'm with YWCA and we're trying, well, I think we need to switch to a more like B2B model. So I'm curious how ads play into that. But for example, we're hosting a racial justice summit in May and I've got meta ads running already, but I thought radio would be interesting, particularly like NPR, people who are driving into the office in the morning and who care about local issues are the people who we want to reach. So a 30-second bit there might be helpful. And then ideally, no more than $500. A B2B marketing strategy is business to business. So instead of directly talking to the consumer, we want to be talking to business leaders, ERGs, people in like a more professional space.
Great, thank you for sharing that. My thoughts on B2B would be partnerships, right? Maybe you're partnering up with another local business leader. You can now do like on social media, if there are digital ads, right? In partnership with, and then now you're able to get them both on your platform and the people that follow your platform, but also theirs and their network and the people that they're reaching. So maybe thinking about, yeah, like what does a partnership look like?
What is that called again, Vianey?
Paid partnership.
And that's through the meta ads manager?
So you can do that through, it could look like in two ways, right? You can do it on Meta with Facebook and Instagram, and you can have kind of like hit two birds with one stone in terms of like you're reaching two audiences. Or it could be organically, and what you're doing is whether it's through boosting or it's just pure organic, but you're showing people that you're partnering on this, whatever that campaign is, right, together. And so now you're tagging them, their followers are seeing your content and vice versa.
Cool, thank
you. All right. Any other folks ready to share? All right. Well, thank you for sharing with that. I'll move along. We're almost done. We have one little ask before we close off with a really cool tool. We love feedback, as we've been saying throughout this presentation. Data is very, very important. And for us, that also means hearing back from our folks. If you let us know how today's training went, it can help us improve it, change it, or even add more stuff to it in the future. So we really appreciate any feedback. And if you're able to take a minute to scan that QR code, we will also have it linked for you. But fairly quick, just 1, 2, 3, a few questions, and making sure that today's objectives were indeed met. All right, and while folks are doing that, we have another training coming up at the end of the month. On the 30th, Tuesday the 30th, we have a Communities of Practice workshop focused on setting up your meta ads. Regardless of where you find yourself in this process, whether you've already have an account or you need to set one up and get verified, or you're already in and you just want to be able to set up an ad campaign, we will be at Cahoots from 12:30 to 1:30 to help you set that up, run through it, answer any questions, or if you just want to come co-work with us and you're working on other things, that's fine too. You can sign up using this QR code as well, or by visiting our calendar. Alrighty. In May, we will have also another amazing training focusing on voter registration and GeoTV messaging by Analyst Institute. In the meantime, you can sign up to Analyst Institute. This is a space for progressives in the advocacy space, grassroots organizations, nonprofits. You do need a reference, so please make sure to let them know we sent you. But you will gain access to weekly reportings and presentations and trainings that they have year-round. They don't just focus on GeoTV and voter registration messaging data, but on a bunch of other topics as well. And when you sign up, you'll be able to get those weekly newsletters. And on the website itself, they have an archive of past presentations and past trainings that do, if you're specifically looking for voter registration or GeoTV, you can look back on them. And yeah, it's a great tool and resource if you don't have a messaging person or a data person. It's a great resource. But yeah, make sure that you let them know we sent you, so you have that reference. And it's kind of like peer-to-peer in that way. It's not open to everyone, so there is a little bit of a screening, but once you're in, again, you get a really great resource. All right, and then lastly, we have a few more offerings throughout this year. We know it's an election year and many of partner organizations are focusing on that. So we want to make sure that we're also building capacity in for us, of course, it's digital communications, but we also have our other departments who are leading trainings and events, communities of practice, and even a harvest program. Our development, you may remember earlier, development coordinator Mo is having more communities of practice now on all things fundraising and development. Our data team is hosting weekly open hours on Mondays, and you can always also request direct coaching for one-on-one coaching or direct support. And Harvest just kicked off this yesterday, on Monday, their candidate and staff training series that will go all through summer and will end on July 1st. So if you know anyone that would be interested in that, and of course, we always have our Praxis resource library available. Just one click sign up and you get access to a whole resource library. And then one last plug, our newsletter. If you ever have anything that you would also like to get out to our network, you are always able to let us know, and we can you can submit it, and we can cross promote on our newsletter as well. Very active on social media. I'm sure you all know that. But that's all we got for you. Thank you for joining.